An historic move by the Federal Reserve as it raises a key interest rate for the first time in nearly a decade. The benchmark rate now stands at 0.25% after holding at near zero since the financial crisis. But what do those slightly higher interest rates mean for you? Here to talk about it, we have economist Peter Morisi back with us. Welcome, Professor. Good to see you.
Nice to see you.
So 0.25 percentage point doesn't sound like a lot. It's not a lot, right? Are we going to feel it?
Well, you're going to not feel it initially, but the Fed's going to do this in succession, a quarter point at a time, so it eases in. Every quarter point is $4 a month in a car loan.
Ooh.
So by the end of next year, car loans will be $16 more a month. By the end of the following year, if they stay on track, $32. Now, the big one is mortgages. Does that go up? Back in Paul Volcker's day, when they moved the short-term rate, the federal funds rate, the long rates would follow it up. These days, not so much. When Bernanke tried it, Chinese money came in, and we expect the same thing to happen again. It's probably going to be just at the short end of the curve.
What are mortgage rates tied to?
Well, they're tied to the 10-year Treasury rate, but it's much harder in a globalized economy for the Fed to influence those.
So car loans, yes. Mortgage rates, maybe not so much. Not yet.
Not yet.
Not
it's going
yet.
to take a lot of push from the Fed to push up mortgage rates. Because after all, things are so bad in Europe and China, all that money's coming here.
Mm-hmm.
And where do they put it? They put it in long-term treasuries, which are a substitute for mortgage-based securities.
We heard that the markets reacted positively, which is a good sign. We don't like a lot of turbulence, right? Were they expecting this?
Well, we've been expecting it so many times. It's like a father going to the delivery room and being told in another month. This baby was supposed to arrive last spring. So the market was relieved that Janet Yellen finally moved. She's starting to get a reputation as being indecisive.
Ooh.
And that's not a good thing for a Fed chairman or woman.
Okay. Well, that's something to think about. What about, you talking about for borrowers. What about for savers? Will savers notice any differences?
We don't know. Historically, they should. Interest rates, once the banks start paying more for money, they're willing to pay you more to get it. The problem is that in the financial crisis, all these new regulations that the president has been heralding has revolutionized American finance. They're hard for small banks to cope with, so small banks have been selling out to big banks. You've had a lot of consolidation. In cities where there were maybe 3 big banks competing for your deposits before, now there are 1 or 2. So we don't know whether those rates will indeed go up.
Do you think that this small rate hike is really a good sign? I mean, it shows that the economy is doing well?
Well, it's supposed to be. And if we had raised rates last spring, we probably would have thought so. But we've been getting some troubling news lately. It's not just the oil patch. The very strong dollar, because things are so sad in Europe and in China, is causing a lot of faltering in the manufacturing sector. Low oil prices are creating problems in the oil patch. You put those together in a recovery that's only at about 2% a year, it's easy for it to fall off track.
The one indicator that may have given people pause to have this interest rate hike was inflation, and it's not moving. I mean,
well, I disagree with that. I disagree with that. If you look at the consumer price index and you subtract energy prices, it's at 2% a year. 2% is a lot of inflation. When I was a kid going to graduate school, which wasn't in the Flintstones era, we used to think zero inflation was a good thing. Now the Fed, in this era of diminished expectations, saying, well, 2%'s okay. You know, 2% is good enough for milk, but 2% is a lot of inflation if you're living on a fixed income after 10 years. We're already at 2% inflation if you subtract out energy, and energy prices can't keep falling. I mean, sooner or later they get to zero. And so my feeling is we have enough inflation already.
Now, you say that these rate hikes are going to keep coming. How frequently are we going to see them?
Well, in the good old days when we were growing in 4% a year, we'd raise it a quarter point, even a half a point every time the Fed meets.
Once a month?
No, every 6 weeks.
Okay.
It meets 8 times a year. Now the Fed is predicting that it'll raise it a quarter of a point every other meeting. Now, whether it does it an eighth of a point at a time or skips a meeting and does a quarter point, doesn't matter. But we're going to do this really slowly because this economy really is more fragile than the rhetoric we heard from the Federal Reserve yesterday would indicate.
So a year down the road, it wouldn't even be 1% more. It would be like 3/4 of 1%?
Well, a year from now, it would be 1% more. And so you'd see that in consumer loans on the short end. And as I said, a car loan would cost you about $16 more a month. But a mortgage, maybe a quarter point or a half a point.
Which is a lot of money, actually, when you're
Well,
talking about your monthly payment, right?
If you're a young person and you're borrowing, a couple $100,000, what did Lyndon Johnson say? A billion here and a billion there, and sooner or later it's real money. Well, it's that way with interest rates. A point here, a point there, and all of a sudden it hurts.
Talk about some of the other aspects of interest rate hikes and the state of the economy. What about workers' paychecks? Will they start seeing bigger paychecks?
Well, certainly not, because interest rates have been pushed up. The labor market is tightening. But the hard reality is that most American workers compete directly or indirectly with workers abroad. And if there's anything in the world, it's too many workers. So, if you're working in a factory, you're competing with a worker in China. But if you're working at the luncheonette across the street, because the factory worker can do that same job as you do, and vice versa, you're competing as well. Wages haven't been moving because of globalization and the fact that we have not been managing it well.
You said there are too many jobs. Unemployment rate is, what, 5%? Isn't that considered?
Well, in the old days, yes, when everybody was looking. But today we have 7 million men who have come down with a very bad case of indolence. It's like the middle-aged influenza. Between the ages of 25 and 54, too old for college, too young to retire, we have 7 million men who are neither working nor looking for work. Part of this is Obamacare, expansion of Medicaid. Now you can get food stamps if you're a guy 35 eating Twinkies, watching the NFL reruns and ESPN. In the old days, you couldn't. That does reduce the work ethic in America. The more we become more like France, the more we grow like France and have unemployment like France. We just don't label it as unemployment in America.
So these people are not reflected in the jobless rate because they've stopped looking.
Right. We count the people that are looking, the people that are employed, as the labor force. And so in that environment, they're not counted, but they sure are unemployed. What's more, they're costing us all money. This new era we're the first society to have aristocracy at the bottom. We're the first society to have a leisure class at the bottom.
Can you explain that a little bit more?
Well, we're paying for unemployment as opposed to assisting the unemployed.
Oh, okay.
Whereas in the old days, we used to pay for aristocrats, and the rest of us had to work for them. Now the aristocrats are at the bottom.
But the people who are out of work and maybe not looking for jobs, those people may not have the skills to get back in the job market.
How much skill does it take to work at Starbucks or to do a laborer's job at a construction site where we see immigrants? The answer is the immigrants will take the jobs because they don't qualify for American social programs, but people that do won't. I get emails all the time from somebody who used to have a desk job and says, do you really expect me to work at a Starbucks for $10 an hour? I says, yeah, I expect you to do that instead of expecting me to subsidize you.
Yeah, maybe it's just the job they won't have. They don't want to have, so we'll give it to somebody who wants it.
Of course, then I get this response. Well, it's easy for you to say you're a professor.
Where do you see, Professor, the weak spots lingering in our economy?
Well, unfortunately, the bright star of the recovery the first 4 years was manufacturing that was really coming back, and now that's really getting clobbered by this strong dollar and the fact that China's in so much trouble. They're sending stuff over here they have no business sending if you look at the cost structure of things. It's really being dumped, and the government's not doing anything about it. The oil sector, for heaven's sakes, if I subsidized Volkswagens, I made them for $15,000, sold them here for $10,000, the government would jump in and push them back with a duty, with a tariff. The Saudis are sending oil, and this administration, like all past administrations, they're afraid of meteors from on high, they're afraid of terrorism, and never telling the Saudis to behave themselves. I mean, selling oil here at $35 a barrel is absolutely irresponsible and, frankly, illegal under trade rules, but we do nothing about it. All
right, that's going to have to be the last word. Interesting discussion. Thanks for coming in today, economist Peter Morici, professor at the University of Maryland. Good to talk to you.
Nice to be with you.
We're back with